Let me tell you something tonight that I wish someone had told me when I was 25 years old, broke, and convinced that life was supposed to get easier. I want to talk to you about something that has destroyed more potential than failure ever could. Something that has robbed more people of greatness than any recession, any circumstance, any bad luck could ever accomplish. I want to talk to you about the seduction of the easy life, because here is what I have discovered after decades of studying human behavior, after decades of watching people rise and watching people fall, after sitting with some of the most extraordinary individuals this world has ever produced, and also watching ordinary men and women with extraordinary potential drift into mediocrity. The easy road is the most dangerous road you will ever walk. It is paved with comfort, it is lined with convenience, and it leads, without exception, to a destination most people spend their final years regretting. The easy life does not announce itself to you. It does not knock on your door and say, "Excuse me, I am here to steal your potential." No, it comes quietly. It comes through small decisions. It comes through the alarm clock you hit one too many times. It comes through the book you meant to read but set aside. It comes through the conversation you avoided because it required courage. It comes through the discipline you postponed until tomorrow and then again until next week. And then you looked up one day and 5 years had passed and you were in the same place with the same problems, making the same complaints, surrounded by the same limitations. That is the danger of choosing ease. Not that one easy choice destroys you, but that one easy choice becomes a habit, and a habit becomes a character, and character becomes your destiny. And suddenly what began as a single moment of choosing comfort over challenge has compiled, like interest on a debt you did not know you were accumulating, into a life that is far smaller than the life you were capable of living. Now I want to be fair tonight. There is nothing wrong with rest. There is nothing wrong with enjoyment. There is nothing wrong with sitting on your porch on a summer evening and watching the fireflies and feeling grateful. Rest is earned. Enjoyment is the reward of disciplined effort. The problem is not with rest. The problem is with rest that has not been earned. The problem is with comfort that has been borrowed against your own future. The problem is with ease that has become not a destination you arrive at after building something magnificent, but rather a starting point from which you never actually depart. Most people in this world are trying to arrange their lives in such a way that requires the least possible output. They are engineering existence around the avoidance of discomfort. They want a good salary without the corresponding effort. They want a great relationship without doing the daily work of becoming someone worth loving. They want remarkable health without the discipline of eating well and moving their body and sleeping enough and managing stress. They want to be respected without having done anything worthy of respect. And when the results do not come, they blame the economy, they blame their upbringing, they blame the government, they blame their boss, they blame circumstances so far removed from their own choices that they have effectively removed themselves from the equation of their own lives. Let me ask you a question tonight. Not rhetorically, I want you to sit with this. When was the last time you chose the harder path on purpose? When was the last time you voluntarily walked towards something difficult? Not because you had to, not because someone was watching, not because someone was grading you or evaluating your performance, but because you understood that the difficulty itself was the curriculum. When was the last time you said to yourself, "This is going to be hard, and that is exactly why I am going to do it"? Because I want to tell you what I have learned about difficulty. Difficulty is not your enemy. Difficulty is your teacher. And like every great teacher, it asks something of you that you were not expecting and that you did not necessarily want to give. Every great teacher pushes past your comfort and into the territory where real transformation happens. Every great teacher makes demands, and difficulty is the greatest teacher you will ever encounter, because difficulty teaches you things about yourself that no classroom, no seminar, no conversation with a mentor, no book you have ever read can teach you. Difficulty reaches into the interior of your character and shows you what you are actually made of. Not what you think you are made of, not what you tell people you are made of, but what is actually in there when the conditions are not favorable and the support is not present and the outcome is uncertain and the cost is high and the sacrifice is real. And here is what I know. Most people are terrified to find out what they are actually made of. They choose ease not because they love ease, but because they are afraid of discovering that they are less than they hoped they were. They would rather live at the surface of their own potential, uncertain of what lies beneath, than dive deep and risk the possibility of finding something disappointing. So they manage their life in a careful, protected, defended way. They never take the big risk. They never attempt the big goal. They never start the company, never write the book, never have the difficult conversation, never make the move, never change the career, never pursue the thing that makes their eyes light up, but that also requires them to surrender the safety they have spent so long constructing. I understand that fear. I lived that fear. When I was a young man working a job that was not wrong but was not right either, there was a voice inside me that knew I was built for something different. But that voice was quiet, and the demands of the comfortable life were loud. The paycheck was predictable. The routine was familiar. The expectations were manageable, and I could have stayed there. Many people who started in similar circumstances stayed there. They found a way to make peace with the smaller version of themselves, and they lived out their years inside the boundaries they had constructed, comfortable but never fully alive. But something happened that changed the trajectory of my life. I met a man who refused to let me stay comfortable in my excuses. He asked me a question that I have carried with me for the rest of my days. He said, "How long have you been working at this job?" I told him 6 years. He said, "And how much have you progressed in 6 years?" I told him honestly. He looked at me with both compassion and directness and said, "Then why would you give it another 6? Not harsh, not unkind, just honest. Just the kind of honest that cuts through the comfortable fog and lands directly on the truth of the situation." And here is what that question did. It forced me to confront the math of the easy life, because the easy life has a math to it, and that math is ruthless even when the life itself is comfortable. If you are not growing, you are declining. If you are not advancing, you are retreating. If you are not building, something is being dismantled. Life does not permit stagnation. It only permits movement in one direction or another, and the comfortable path, the path of least resistance, the path of managed expectations and avoided challenges, that path moves only downward, only inward, only toward a smaller and smaller version of what you could have become. The math of the easy life says, 5 years from now, if you make the same choices you are making today, you will be in a worse position than you are in today, even if it does not feel like it, even if everything appears stable, because stability without growth is simply decay that has not yet revealed itself. It is a building that appears sound but has been quietly compromised at its foundation, and one day the compromised foundation cannot support the weight of the years any longer, and what appeared stable for so long collapses with a finality that shocks everyone who was watching but should not have surprised anyone who was paying attention. Now let me tell you about the alternative. Let me tell you what happens when a person makes the decision, a real decision, not a casual intention, not a vague wish, but a genuine commitment from the deepest level of their character to refuse the easy life. Let me tell you what happens when a person says, "I will no longer arrange my days around the avoidance of difficulty. I will arrange my days around the pursuit of growth, the practice of discipline, the development of excellence, the cultivation of the kind of character that can carry the weight of the life I actually want to live." When that decision is made with real sincerity, the first thing that happens is that the person begins to see their current circumstances with extraordinary clarity. Because when you stop defending your comfort, you stop needing to explain away the evidence that your comfort is costing you. When you stop protecting your easy choices, you stop needing to rationalize why those easy choices are actually the smart choices. You can look at your life plainly, as it actually is, and ask, is this the life I am capable of? Is this what I would choose if I were choosing with courage rather than with fear? Is this what I would design for myself if I genuinely believed that a better design was possible? And most people, when they look at their lives this honestly, discover that the answer to all three of those questions is no. The life they are living is not the life they are capable of. The life they are living is the life they settled for. The life they are living is the product not of their maximum effort and their fullest engagement and their deepest courage, but of their managed expectations and their protected comfort and their carefully curated avoidance of anything that could go wrong. That discovery, painful as it is actually the beginning of something magnificent. Because you cannot improve what you will not honestly examine. You cannot correct a course that you refuse to acknowledge is off. You cannot build a better life while you are still defending the adequacy of the insufficient one you currently have. The honest examination is not punishment, it is permission. Permission to finally pursue what you were always capable of pursuing, but were too comfortable or too afraid or too uncertain to reach for. So you make the commitment. And then comes the part that surprises most people because they expected that the commitment would immediately feel wonderful. They expected that the decision to pursue excellence would be accompanied by a great surge of energy and clarity and motivation that would carry them effortlessly forward. And it does feel wonderful initially. There is a real euphoria in a genuine decision. There is real energy in a clear direction. But that initial energy is not the strategy. That initial energy is simply the emotional response to having chosen courage over comfort. And emotions, as powerful as they are not a sustainable fuel source. What sustains you is not motivation. What sustains you is discipline. And discipline is built through repetition, not through inspiration. Discipline is built through the daily choice, made again and again without the benefit of excitement or enthusiasm or favorable conditions, to do the thing you committed to doing, even when every part of you would prefer to do something easier. Discipline is built through the morning you work when you do not want to work, through the conversation you initiate when you would rather avoid it, through the practice you maintain when the results are not yet visible and the feedback is not yet encouraging, and the path forward requires you to trust a process whose destination you cannot yet see. And this is where most people fall away. Not at the moment of commitment, at the moment of discipline. Because commitment is made in the emotional highs, and discipline is tested in the ordinary moments, the unremarkable mornings, the unexciting afternoons, the quiet evenings when no one is watching and no one is applauding and there is no evidence yet that your effort is producing anything meaningful. In those moments, the easy life calls to you again, and it calls to you with a familiar voice. It says, just this once. You worked hard yesterday. Take a day. You deserve a break. You can catch up tomorrow. What difference does one day really make? And the honest answer to that question is complicated. One day in isolation rarely makes the decisive difference. One skipped workout in isolation does not ruin your fitness. One avoided conversation in isolation does not destroy your relationship. One day of poor choices in isolation does not determine your destiny. But here is what I have learned after watching human lives closely for many decades. Nobody skips just one day. Nobody makes just one easy choice in isolation and then returns to the rigorous path without consequence. What happens is that one skipped day makes the next day easier to skip, because you have established that skipping is acceptable under certain conditions, and conditions are always available to justify whatever you have already decided to do. This is the compounding principle working against you. Just as discipline compounds over time into extraordinary results, ease compounds over time into extraordinary limitation. Every time you choose the comfortable option when the challenging option was available and necessary, you are making a small deposit into a pattern of behavior that will, with enough repetitions, define who you are. Not who you tell people you are, not who you aspire to be, but who you actually are in the moments that reveal character. Now, I want to talk to you about what I call the philosophy of the chosen struggle, because I have noticed something about the people in this world who build lives of genuine significance, lives of deep satisfaction and meaningful contribution, and the kind of success that holds up under close inspection. They do not merely endure difficulty. They choose it. They seek it. They develop a relationship with challenge that is not reluctant or resigned, but active and even grateful. They understand something that the average person has not yet discovered, which is that the struggle itself is where the growth lives. Not adjacent to the struggle, not after the struggle, inside the struggle, in the midst of the resistance. In the moment when the weight is heaviest and the path is steepest and the outcome is least certain, that is precisely where the human being grows. That is where character is formed, where competence is developed, where confidence is built, where the gap between the person you are and the person you are capable of becoming is actually bridged. The athlete who trains through discomfort is not suffering needlessly. The discomfort is the signal that the adaptation is occurring. The discomfort is the physiological announcement that the body is being asked to do something it could not previously do, and is therefore reorganizing itself at a cellular level to meet the new demand. Remove the discomfort, eliminate the challenge, manage everything so that the athlete is always operating within their current capacity, and you will have an athlete who remains forever at the level they were already at, comfortable, familiar, and completely undeveloped. That principle extends far beyond athletics. It extends into every domain of human life and human endeavor. The entrepreneur who builds a genuine business does not grow through the months when everything is working and the revenue is flowing and the team is performing and the customers are satisfied. The entrepreneur grows in the months when the product fails and the funding dries up and the team doubts and the customers leave and the path forward is genuinely unclear and the rational case for quitting is stronger than the rational case for continuing. That is when the real development occurs. That is when the entrepreneur is being shaped by the fire of their chosen difficulty into something that can actually build something lasting. The person who builds a great marriage does not build it in the early days of romantic certainty and enthusiastic compatibility. The great marriage is built in the years when the couple must choose each other actively, consciously, deliberately, against the backdrop of familiarity and routine and the accumulated disappointments that any two human beings will generate for each other over a sufficient span of time. It is built in the difficult conversations that could have been avoided, in the apologies that required genuine humility, in the sacrifices that were made without guarantee of reciprocity, in the choice made again and again to invest in the relationship rather than to withdraw from it when withdrawal would have been so much easier. Do you see the pattern? In every domain of genuine human achievement, the willingness to engage with difficulty is not incidental to the achievement. It is the mechanism of the achievement. Greatness is not something that happens to people who happen to have difficult lives. Greatness is something that is built by people who willingly engage with difficulty because they understand that difficulty is the only raw material from which greatness can be constructed. And this brings me to something I want you to understand very deeply tonight, something I want to plant so firmly in your thinking that it changes the way you evaluate every choice you make going forward. The question is not whether your life will contain difficulty. It will. Difficulty is not optional. Difficulty is guaranteed. The only real question that you have any actual authority over is which difficulties you will choose. Read that again in your mind. Which difficulties will you choose? Because here's the truth. If you choose ease today, you are not choosing a life without difficulty. You are choosing a different set of difficulties, harder and more humiliating and more limiting and more painful than the difficulties you are trying to avoid. The person who chooses not to develop financial discipline does not avoid financial difficulty. They guarantee it. The person who chooses not to do the hard work of maintaining their health does not avoid the difficulty of illness and limitation and diminished vitality. They guarantee it. The person who chooses not to develop their skills and their knowledge and their capabilities does not avoid the difficulty of irrelevance and stagnation and watching opportunities pass to people who were willing to invest what they were not willing to invest. You will have difficulty. The question is whether you want the difficulty that builds something or the difficulty that destroys something. Whether you want the difficulty that, when you are on the other side of it, you can look back on with pride and gratitude, or the difficulty that, when you are enduring it, you can only look back on with regret and the painful awareness that it could have been avoided if you had simply been willing to embrace a different kind of difficulty at an earlier point in your journey. This is the choice that the easy life is actually offering you, not relief from difficulty. A trade of one kind of difficulty for another, with the crucial difference being that the difficulty you earn through discipline comes with development attached, and the difficulty you inherit through avoidance comes with only regret. Now let me speak to those of you who have been making the easy choices for some time, because I know you are in this room tonight, and I want you to know that I am not here to condemn you. I am not here to make your past feel heavier than it already does, because I have noticed that people who are already suffering under the weight of their accumulated easy choices do not need someone to add shame to the burden. They need someone to show them that the burden can be set down. They need someone to remind them that the past is fixed and permanent and unchangeable and utterly irrelevant to what is possible from this moment forward. Your past choices explain your current situation. They do not determine your future situation, and that distinction is not a comforting platitude designed to make you feel better without doing anything useful. It is a statement of how time and human agency actually function. You cannot go back. You cannot revise the years of avoided challenge and postponed discipline and chosen comfort. Those years are done, and they produced what they produced. But the next years are not done. The next years are as available to you tonight as they are to the most disciplined, most purposeful, most rigorous person in this room. The clock does not favor those who have been making great choices. The clock gives everyone the same number of hours going forward, regardless of what they did with their hours going backward. What that means is this: the decision to refuse the easy life is available to you right now, tonight. It does not require a perfect moment. It does not require optimal conditions. It does not require the resolution of all your current problems or the elimination of all your current obstacles or the arrival of some external circumstance that will finally make the courageous choice the obvious choice. The courageous choice is always available, and it is made every single time in the presence of the comfortable alternative. That is what makes it courageous. If there were no comfortable alternative, choosing the harder path would require no courage at all. I want to talk to you now about the relationship between self-image and the choices we make. Because I have come to understand, after watching this for many years, that the reason most people keep choosing ease is not primarily laziness. The real reason, the deeper reason, is that they have a self-image that is too small to accommodate the life they are actually capable of building. They have a vision of themselves that stops short of what they could be, and their choices naturally conform to that self-image because human beings are extraordinarily consistent in acting in accordance with who they believe themselves to be. If you believe you are someone who struggles with discipline, you will struggle with discipline. Not because discipline is objectively difficult for you, but because every time a disciplined choice is available, your self-image provides the exit. This is hard for me. I am not naturally disciplined. I have always been this way. And having provided yourself with that exit, you take it, because the exit is consistent with the story, and we will choose consistency with our story over the opportunity for growth almost every time, unless the story itself has changed first. This is why I spend so much time talking about the importance of the books you read, the ideas you absorb, the people you spend your time around, the conversations you participate in, the inputs that shape your thinking about what is possible for a person like you. Because those inputs do not merely inform you, they form you. They construct the internal image that your external choices are then trying to match. If the inputs are small, the image is small. If the image is small, the choices are small. And if the choices are small, repeated over years and decades, the life is small. But the opposite is also true, and this is the extraordinary thing about human beings that fills me with genuine amazement even now. Give a person consistently elevated inputs. Surround them with examples of what human beings have actually achieved. Show them what dedication looks like over time. Demonstrate what discipline produces across years of consistent practice. Introduce them to people who have refused the easy life and built something genuinely magnificent as a result. And that person's self-image begins to expand. Slowly maybe, unevenly certainly, but it expands. And as the image expands, the choices begin to change. And as the choices change, the results begin to change. And as the results begin to change, the evidence builds that the expanded self-image was accurate all along, which further expands the image, which further elevates the choices, which further improves the results, in a virtuous cycle that, if sustained, carries a person to levels of achievement and fulfillment that they could not have imagined when they were still inhabiting their original, unexpanded, comfort-constructed self-image. This is not magic. This is not wishful thinking dressed up in motivational language. This is the observable mechanism by which human transformation actually occurs. This is how people change, not through willpower alone, not through forcing themselves to act differently while the underlying image remains the same, but through the gradual intentional reconstruction of their identity from the inside out, so that the new behaviors are not a constant battle against who they are, but a natural expression of who they have become. And you begin that reconstruction, that expansion of identity, not by doing the big dramatic things. You begin it by doing the small, consistent things. By reading the book tonight instead of watching the program that leaves you feeling slightly emptier than you were before. By going to bed at the right time so you can rise early enough to have a morning that you designed rather than a morning that simply happened to you. By having the honest conversation you have been postponing, by working on the skill that you know you need but that requires sustained effort over a long period of time before it pays any visible dividend, by choosing, in small but specific and daily ways, the productive discomfort over the comfortable avoidance. These small, consistent choices do something remarkable. They begin to construct evidence, and evidence over time is more convincing than any argument. You can tell yourself you are disciplined until your voice is hoarse from the telling and nothing will change. But show yourself that you are disciplined repeatedly across days and weeks and months, and something shifts at a level deeper than thought. The evidence penetrates to the level of identity, and suddenly you are not merely trying to be disciplined. You are a disciplined person with a history of disciplined choices and a growing collection of disciplined results. And from that identity, the next disciplined choice is not a struggle. It is simply consistent with who you now understand yourself to be. I want to address something tonight because I think it is important, and I think many people in this room carry a version of this objection without ever fully articulating it. The objection sounds like this: I would pursue a more ambitious, more demanding, more growth-oriented life if I did not have the responsibilities I have, if I did not have the family obligations and the financial pressures and the time constraints and the circumstances that limit my options. I would gladly step off the easy path and onto a harder and more rewarding one. But the circumstances are what they are, and given those circumstances, I am doing what is reasonable. And I want to respond to that with both respect and directness. First, the respect. I understand that circumstances are real. I understand that responsibilities are real. I understand that some people face genuine constraints that others do not face, and that comparing the available options of one person to the available options of another without accounting for the very different starting conditions is both unfair and analytically useless. I honor the reality of what some people are navigating. Now, the directness. The easy life has never asked anyone for an extraordinary amount of time. It does not need your whole day. It does not require the absence of family obligations or financial pressures or demanding circumstances. It only needs a few moments per day, consistently applied over a long period of time, to compound into a life radically different from the one you would otherwise live. The question is not whether you have perfect conditions. The question is whether you are using imperfect conditions as an explanation for your current limitations or as the raw material for your ongoing development. Because here is what I have observed. The people with the most difficult circumstances are often the people who do the most remarkable things, not in spite of their circumstances, but in relationship to them. The difficulty of their situation created an urgency that comfort never could have generated. The limitations of their resources forced a creativity that abundance never would have demanded. The weight of their responsibilities clarified their priorities in ways that easy living never could have produced. I have seen this too many times to dismiss it as coincidence. Difficulty, when met with the right philosophy, does not obstruct growth. It catalyzes it. The key phrase there is when met with the right philosophy. Because the same difficulty met with the wrong philosophy, the philosophy of victimhood and resignation and the comfortable explanation that says your circumstances are why your results are limited, that same difficulty produces only bitterness and stagnation and the slow accumulation of regret. The difficulty is not what determines the outcome. The philosophy you bring to the difficulty determines the outcome. And philosophy is something you choose. Not once, dramatically, at a single moment of clarity. But every day in the quiet of your own thinking, in the private conversation you have with yourself about what is possible and what you deserve and what you are capable of and what you are willing to do. The philosophy you carry is always available for revision. It is never permanently fixed. No matter how long you have held a limiting belief about what your life is capable of becoming, that belief can be examined, challenged, and replaced by a more accurate and more expansive one. This is the work I'm inviting you to tonight. Not the dramatic gesture, not the revolutionary reinvention that you announce to everyone around you, but that fails to survive contact with the first Tuesday morning when enthusiasm is absent and the bed is warm and the reasons to wait just a little longer are readily available. I am inviting you to the daily, quiet, serious, unglamorous work of reconstructing your philosophy, one thought at a time, one choice at a time, one day at a time. Because I promise you this, the accumulated result of that daily, quiet, unglamorous work is extraordinary. I have watched it produce extraordinary results across the full range of human endeavors and human circumstances. I have watched it transform the financially desperate into the financially free. I have watched it transform the physically diminished into the physically vital. I have watched it transform the professionally stagnant into the professionally significant. I have watched it transform people who had accepted a small and shrinking life into people who were, in the final chapters of their existence, living with a fullness and a richness and a depth of engagement that many young people, still operating under the comfortable assumptions of easy living, had not yet discovered was possible. And what did all of these transformed people have in common? Not talent, although talent was present in various degrees. Not advantageous circumstances, although circumstances varied enormously across the group. Not external support, although support was sometimes available and sometimes absent. What they had in common was the willingness to refuse the easy life in their particular domain and their particular season, and to choose instead the demanding, developing, disciplined path that eventually led them somewhere worth arriving. Let me talk to you now about the specific practice of refusing ease in the area of your thinking, because I believe that everything begins in the mind. The quality of your life is ultimately determined by the quality of your habitual thoughts. And most people, if they were honest about the content of their habitual thinking, would discover that the vast majority of it is not building anything at all. It is managing the anxiety of the present. It is replaying the frustrations of the past. It is drifting in the neutral gear of mental entertainment that requires nothing of the thinker and produces nothing for the future. The discipline of thought, the deliberate cultivation of ideas that serve your development rather than simply pass your time, is one of the most demanding practices available to a human being, and it is one of the most rewarded. The person who reads with intention, who seeks out the best ideas that have been thought throughout human history, and who brings those ideas into conversation with their own situation and their own questions and their own developing philosophy, that person has access to a resource of incalculable value. Every book that has ever been written, every idea that has ever been articulated by a mind greater than your own. Every experience that has been distilled through the discipline of serious reflection and committed to language, all of it is available to you. All of it is waiting to be absorbed and to contribute to the construction of a better, more capable, more effective version of who you currently are. But you have to be willing to do the work of absorbing it. Reading is not passive. Real reading, reading that changes you, requires your full engagement. It requires that you bring your own experience and your own questions and your own honest assessment of where you are and where you want to go, and that you hold those things up against the ideas in the pages and ask, what does this change about how I understand my situation? What does this require me to reconsider? What does this suggest I should do differently, think differently, approach differently? That kind of reading is demanding, but it is the kind that produces transformation rather than merely filling time. And beyond reading, the discipline of your own sustained thinking, the practice of sitting with a problem or a question or an opportunity long enough to actually think your way to insight rather than simply gathering the first available comfortable thought and accepting it as sufficient, that discipline separates the people who are genuinely developing from the people who are merely accumulating years without accumulating wisdom. I want to close by talking about what is actually at stake in this choice between the easy life and the demanding one, because I think sometimes we speak about personal development as if the only thing at stake is individual fulfillment, as if the decision to grow or not to grow is a private matter with private consequences, affecting only the person who makes the decision. And while individual fulfillment is a worthy thing to pursue, I want to suggest tonight that the stakes are considerably higher than that. Every human being in this world is a nexus of relationships, responsibilities, influences, and possibilities. You are connected to other people, some of whom look to you, for example, for guidance, for the model of what a human life well lived actually looks like. You are connected to children who will be shaped by the patterns they observe in your choices. You are connected to colleagues who will be either elevated or diminished by the quality of what you bring to shared endeavors. You are connected to a community that is either enriched or impoverished by the degree to which its members are developing and contributing and living up to their actual potential. When you choose the easy life, the cost is not only yours, the cost is distributed across everyone who is connected to you because they receive a smaller, less developed, less capable, less fully realized version of you than they would have received if you had made the demands on yourself that your full development required. Your children receive a parent who settled. Your colleagues receive a collaborator who chose comfort over excellence. Your community receives a member who had more to give than they chose to give and who spent the gift on their own comfort rather than on the development that would have made the gift worth receiving. And I raise this not to burden you with guilt about the obligations you carry, but to remind you that the reason to refuse the easy life is not only selfish, even though there is nothing wrong with the selfish reasons. The reason to refuse the easy life is that the best possible version of you, the version that emerges from years of chosen discipline and genuine challenge and authentic development, that version of you is genuinely, concretely, practically valuable to the people who share this world with you. You owe it to them. And more than that, you owe it to yourself. Not because self-interest is always the highest motive, but because you were built for more than this. You were designed for challenge. You were constructed for growth. You were given a mind that is capable of learning, a body that is capable of development, a character that is capable of deepening, and a spirit that is capable of the kind of expansion that turns a constrained and limited human life into something genuinely extraordinary. Refuse the easy life. Not because difficulty is pleasant, but because it is productive. Not because comfort is evil, but because comfort that is borrowed against your own development is a debt that compounds into poverty of the most painful kind, the poverty of unrealized potential, the poverty of the unlived life, the poverty of standing at the end of your years with the full knowledge of what you could have become and the full weight of the awareness that you chose something smaller than that. You have time, not unlimited time, not the luxury of indefinite postponement, but tonight, this moment, there is time to make a different decision, to reorient around a different set of values, to commit with the seriousness that genuine commitment requires to the demanding, rewarding, character-building, life-expanding, legacy-creating work of becoming everything you are actually capable of becoming. The easy life will always be available to you. It will always be there, comfortable and inviting and asking nothing of you, and it will always deliver exactly what it promises, which is ease today in exchange for limitation tomorrow. The demanding life, the life of chosen discipline and voluntary challenge and the deliberate pursuit of your own full development, that life is also available to you. It requires more, considerably more, and it delivers more, considerably more. The choice is yours. It has always been yours. It will always be yours, and it is being made quietly and with permanent consequences in the small decisions of each ordinary day. Make it well.